In the gleaming towers of Lagos, where wealth speaks in air-conditioned silence, Kofi Mensah, youngest son of Nigeria's most powerful businessman, lives suspended between his father's empire and his own conscience. His world is marble floors, imported champagne, and the weight of inherited expectation. Then one morning, he truly sees Amma, the housekeeper who has worked in his father's mansion for 3 years, invisible to everyone but him. She speaks in soft Twi, reads books borrowed from the library, and teaches the neighborhood children under a mango tree. Kofi's awakening to her humanity becomes an awakening to his own, and when love blooms between them, his family's response shatters the illusion that wealth and status are synonymous with wisdom. This is a story about the courage it takes to choose truth over tradition, and how one man's refusal to look away changed a family's understanding of what really matters. Chapter 1. The morning everything changed. That day began like any other, until one act of kindness changed everything. What started as a small encounter between two strangers became a story his whole family would remember. The Mensah mansion sat on Victoria Island like a monument to unapologetic success. 30 rooms, 3 levels, a courtyard where water cascaded from imported Italian fountains. Kofi moved through it, as he always did on Saturday mornings, barefoot across the cool tile, his phone glowing with messages from people who wanted something from him. He was 28 years old, groomed since birth to inherit his father's import business, and he had never once questioned whether he wanted it. The kitchen was his only refuge. That morning, he found Amma there, standing on a stool to reach the highest shelf, her hand trembling slightly as she stretched. The sun cut through the window in a way that made everything look like it was underwater. He watched her for a moment, really watched her, before she noticed him. She startled, nearly dropping the stack of plates. "I'm sorry, sir," she said quickly, climbing down. "I will leave. I did not mean to." "Stay," he said. The word surprised them both. Her name was Amma Owusu. She had worked in the mansion for 3 years, and Kofi realized with a strange shame that he had never truly spoken to her. She was one of the invisible people who made his world function, like the driver, like the gardener, like the security guard at the gate. She arrived at dawn, left after dark, and existed in the space between his noticing and his forgetting. That morning, she made him tea. Real tea, not the rushed coffee his mother preferred. While they stood in the quiet kitchen, the city beginning to wake beyond the high walls, Amma told him about the book she was reading. It was an old copy of Things Fall Apart, borrowed from the community library. Her voice changed when she spoke about it, became stronger, as if the words belonged to her in a way that ordinary speech did not. Kofi listened the way his therapist had taught him to listen, not planning his response, not thinking about what he would say next, just present. And in that presence, something shifted. When she left the kitchen, he sat alone and realized he had been holding his breath. That afternoon, driving through Lagos traffic, Kofi found himself thinking about her hands, how they moved when she spoke, the way she had looked embarrassed when he asked her what she wanted to do with her life. She wanted to finish her secondary education. She wanted to teach. She wanted her sister in the village to have the chance she never had. Normal things. Human things. His phone rang. It was his father, summoning him to the office. Board meeting about the expansion into Tanzania. Kofi answered yes to everything, the way he always did, while watching the city pass by the window, the contrast sharp and awful, the high-rise offices where his father's decisions rippled outward like stones thrown into water, and the streets below where Amma walked home each evening, carrying her small dreams in a borrowed book. By evening, Kofi knew he was in trouble. He had looked into her eyes, and he had seen what his family had trained him not to see. Another human being, complete and worthy and terribly fragile. It was the most dangerous thing that had ever happened to him, though he did not yet know why. Chapter 2. The invisible made visible. For weeks, Kofi moved through his life as if it were a film he was watching from somewhere outside himself. Board meetings, dinners with strategic business partners, conversations with his mother about finding an appropriate match, code for a woman from one of Lagos's 5 acceptable families, daughters of bankers and diplomats whose marriages were really mergers. None of it touched him anymore. He found reasons to be home. He woke early to the sound of Amma sweeping the courtyard, her movements rhythmic and peaceful in the stillness before the city roared to life. He lingered in the kitchen when she made lunch. He began to learn the rhythm of her day, the small gestures that revealed who she was when no one was watching. Amma lived in a small room behind the garden, 5 meters from wealth she would never own. She spent her evenings reading or teaching the neighborhood children mathematics under the mango tree, her voice patient as she explained fractions and percentages to kids who had no desk, no paper, only the hunger to understand. Kofi watched her from a distance, seeing in her the thing his family had trained into invisibility, dignity. One evening he brought her textbooks, secondary school materials. "My cousin doesn't need them anymore," he lied smoothly. She refused. The rejection stung more than it should have. "I cannot accept," she said quietly. "People would talk." He understood what she meant. In the mansion, in the neighborhood, in the eyes of his family, Emma's acceptance of anything from him would transform her into something else, something less respectable, something dangerous. To be kind to her was to cross a line. To be generous was to invite scandal. Instead, he began a different kind of giving. He recommended her for a better position in the household, one that paid more. He suggested to his father that she be given Sundays off to attend her church, to study for her exams. These gifts were small enough to seem practical, large enough to change her circumstances. His mother noticed. "Kofi," she said one evening, her voice cool as she arranged flowers at the dining table, "why are you so interested in the housekeeper's schedule?" "I'm not," he said, but his voice wavered. "I simply thought it was inefficient that we—" "The girl is becoming too familiar," his mother interrupted. "It happens sometimes. They imagine things. We must be careful with our generosity, or it becomes misunderstood." He said nothing. The implication hung in the air between them, that Amma would somehow seduce him through gratitude, that his kindness was a luxury he could not afford. What his mother did not understand was that he had already been seduced by her intelligence, by her refusal to accept pity, by the way she moved through the world with grace, despite everything designed to diminish her. That night, unable to sleep, Kofi sat in the garden and watched her window. The small light of her lamp glowed against the darkness. He imagined her reading, learning, dreaming of a life that seemed impossibly far from the one she was living. He made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, he would speak to her. Not as employer to employee, not as rich man to poor woman, but as one human being to another, with all the risk and truth that honesty required. Chapter 3. The Confession. The next morning, Kofi's courage almost deserted him. He found her in the garden, pruning the roses with a focus that suggested she was using the work to avoid thinking about something else. The sun caught her profile, and he was struck again by how much he did not know her, and how desperately he wanted to. "Amma," he said, "can we talk? Please, not here." She followed him to the rear courtyard, where the high walls blocked them from view. His heart was hammering in a way he had never experienced before. This was not a negotiation or a decision. This was vulnerability. And he had been raised to never be vulnerable. "I need to tell you something," he began, "and you can refuse me, you can be angry, you can leave, but you deserve to know the truth." She waited, her hands folded, her expression unreadable. "I see you," he said simply, "not as someone who works in our house, as you. I see how you read during your lunch break, how you teach those children under the tree, how you give your sister money even when you have almost nothing. I see your kindness, your strength, your intelligence. And He stopped, terrified. I have developed feelings for you that go far beyond what is appropriate for my position. The silence that followed was absolute. You should not speak to me this way, she said finally, but her voice trembled. I know. You're right. I apologize. But I could not continue lying by staying silent. She turned away from him, her hands shaking. If your family hears this, I will lose my job. I will be blamed. You know this. Yes, he said. I know this, and I will not ask you to risk it, but I needed you to know that you are seen, that you matter to me, not as a servant, but as a person. She left without another word. Kofi spent the day in agony, convinced he had destroyed the only real friendship he had ever known. That evening, she came to him. If we do this, Amma said quietly, we do it with honesty. No hiding. I will not be anyone's secret. Kofi pulled her close, and for the first time in his life, he felt real. Comment where you're watching from. I want to see how far these stories of hope and redemption can travel. Chapter 4. The first crack in the foundation. 3 months passed in a strange, doubled reality. In the mansion, Kofi maintained the appearance of the dutiful son. He attended board meetings. He spoke about expansion strategies and profit margins. He dined with his parents and answered their increasingly pointed questions about why he had not yet married. Outside the walls, he was someone else entirely. He and Amma found small pockets of time and space. A cafe in Ikoyi, where nobody knew them. A bookstore in a quiet neighborhood. Once they drove to the beach at sunset, and she rested her head on his shoulder while the Atlantic crashed against the shore, and he felt more alive than he had in his entire privileged existence. But the secret was a living thing, growing heavier with each lie of omission. His younger sister Naomi noticed first. She caught him staring at Amma in the courtyard, saw the way his attention had shifted. Naomi was 24, sharper than their parents, and she had inherited none of their blindness. "You're in love with her," she said one afternoon, confronting him in his office. "Naomi, don't lie to me. I'm your sister. I'm asking you a direct question." Kofi considered denying it. Instead, he said yes. Naomi's face transformed, anger, concern, disbelief, all flickering across her features in rapid succession. "Kofi, do you understand what will happen when they find out? I'm an adult. It's my choice. It's not just your choice. You're not thinking about what this will do to her. She will be destroyed. People will call her a seductress, a gold digger. She will lose everything, which is why we're being careful. You cannot be careful enough. Lagos is a small city when you're wealthy. People talk, servants talk, our cousins talk. It will come out, and when it does..." Naomi stopped, something in her expression shifting. Does she know? Does Amma understand the full scope of what she's risking? "Yes," Kofi said. "We've discussed it. And you're still proceeding?" "Yes." Naomi left his office without another word. Within 2 days, he knew the secret was no longer theirs alone. His father called him to his study, a room Kofi had learned to fear as a child, a place where decisions were made that affected his life without his input. "Is it true?" his father asked, not looking up from his desk. There was no point in lying. Yes, his father's silence was worse than any shouting. Finally he looked up, and Kofi saw something in his eyes he had never seen before. Disappointment so profound it looked like contempt. "You will end this immediately. That girl will be let go tomorrow. You will not contact her. We will find her work elsewhere, far from Lagos, and we will never speak of this again." "No," Kofi said. The word hung in the room like a violation. "Excuse me. I said no, I'm not ending this, and you cannot fire her for who she chooses to love. His father stood slowly. You understand what you are doing, what you are throwing away. The business, the company, the family name. Kofi felt something break open inside him. Yes, I understand, and I don't care anymore. Chapter 5. The Breaking Point. The confrontation that followed was orchestrated like a military campaign. His parents called a family meeting. His older brother Kwame arrived from Accra, his face grave with the importance of the crisis. His aunts materialized from various corners of the city, their jewelry clicking like weapons, their disapproval filling the air like humidity before a storm. Emma was sent away to stay with relatives that night. Kofi did not get to say goodbye. He did not know where she was. The deliberate separation was a cruelty so precise it took his breath away. The meeting began in the evening, in the formal sitting room that was used only for occasions that demanded ceremony. Kofi sat surrounded by his family, and they spoke about him as if he were not there. A problem to be solved, a son who had lost his mind, a disgrace waiting to happen. We have given him everything, his mother said, her voice tight with betrayal. Education abroad, every opportunity. And this is how he repays us? By throwing his life away on a servant? It is not about her status, Kofi began, but his uncle cut him off. Of course it is about her status. What else could it possibly be about? She has nothing to offer but her youth, and that will fade. In 5 years, you will look at her and remember what you have lost, and you will resent her for it. You're making assumptions about things you don't understand, Kofi said quietly. We understand perfectly, his father said. His voice was ice. You are infatuated. This girl has seduced you with gratitude and false intimacy. What you believe is love is simply confusion. I am not confused. I love her. She is intelligent and kind and stronger than anyone in this room. She deserves... What she deserves is irrelevant, his mother interrupted. What matters is what is best for this family. And this relationship is a catastrophe, waiting to destroy us all. Kwame leaned forward. Brother, think practically. Think about the business, our partners, our relationships, our standing. A marriage like this would be a scandal that would take decades to recover from. Then we recover, Kofi said. Or we don't, but I will not sacrifice my happiness for appearances. His father's response was final. If you proceed with this, you are no longer my son. You will have no access to the family business, no support from this house, no inheritance. You will be financially cut off. You will be erased. The threat landed like a physical blow. Kofi understood in that moment what sacrifice actually meant. He had romanticized poverty, had imagined love could sustain him through hardship, but standing in that room, facing the real consequences, he felt the weight of what he was choosing. He thought of Amma, sent away without explanation. He thought of the fear in her eyes when they had discussed this possibility. He thought of all the times she had said, "Be careful, they will hurt you for this." And then he thought of never seeing her again. Then I'm erased, he said. Chapter 6. The Cost of Truth. The days that followed were the longest of Kofi's life. His family froze him out with a precision that suggested they had been planning it. His accounts were accessed, then closed. His key to the mansion was collected by a housekeeper who would not meet his eyes. His brother removed him from the company's email chains. He was unmade, systematically and without mercy. He found a small apartment in Yaba, a neighborhood far from the gleaming island where his family lived. He took a job at a smaller import firm, starting from nothing, learning what it meant to actually work for money instead of inheriting it. The salary was a fraction of what he had once spent on dinner. It was terrifying. It was also the first real thing he had ever done. After a week, he found Amma. His family had sent her to their relatives in Kumasi, But he tracked her down through a friend of a friend, following a chain of connections that felt like faith. When she opened the door, she was thinner, her eyes hollowed by worry. "Oh, what have you done?" she whispered. "Your family, everyone is saying you have nothing now. They said you chose me and lost everything. Kofi, why would you do this?" "Because you're worth it," he said simply. "Because I could not live knowing I had sacrificed you to keep their approval. Because I want to build a real life with you, not a secret one." She wept then, not from joy but from the weight of what his choice had cost him. "You should hate me. Your life was perfect and I ruined it." "My life was not perfect. It was empty. You filled it with meaning." He held her. "I know this is terrifying. I know I have no security to offer you, but I have myself, completely and honestly. If you want that, if you want me, then let's build something real." It took her weeks to say yes again, but when she did, it was with full knowledge of what lay ahead. No more illusions, no more protection, just two people choosing each other in the face of everything designed to keep them apart. If this story already touched your heart, hit the like button. It helps Kofi and Amma's message reach more people who still believe in kindness. Chapter 7. The distance closes. 3 years passed slowly, like seasons turning in a place that had learned to measure time differently. Kofi and Amma moved into a modest house in Accra. He started his own business, small and honest, importing local crafts and connecting them to markets in Europe and America. It was not glamorous. There were months when the money was terrifyingly tight, but it was his, built on his own effort and integrity. Amma finished her secondary education. Then she enrolled in teacher training college. She taught in a primary school, her hands patient with children who reminded her of herself at that age. She was alive in a way that transcended beauty, purpose radiating from her like light. They were happy in a way that their families could not recognize, because it did not look like success as they had defined it. There were no Michelin stars, no imported vehicles, no social standing. But there was peace, there was partnership. There was the small miracle of being truly known by another person and being loved anyway. One day, nearly 4 years after he had left Lagos, Kofi received a phone call from his sister Naomi. Their father had suffered a stroke. It was not severe, but it had frightened him. For the first time, Kwame Sr. was confronting his own mortality, and it was changing something in him. "He has been asking about you," Naomi said quietly. "Not forgiving exactly, but asking. I think he is ready to listen." Kofi went to Lagos. He stood outside the Mensa mansion and felt the weight of it differently now, not as a monument to success, but as a place where he had learned to be dishonest. He walked into the sitting room where his father lay, diminished by illness, but not broken. Their conversation was difficult. Kwame Sr. did not apologize, but he asked questions. He listened to his son describe his life, his work, his wife. And slowly, something shifted in his expression. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. His son had not simply survived. He had thrived. The woman Kofi had chosen was not a burden, but an equal, sharp-minded and capable. The business he had built was small but solid. The life was real. "I was wrong," Kwame Sr. said finally, each word seeming to cost him. "Not about protecting you or wanting the best for our family, but I was wrong about what the best is. I was wrong about her." Kofi felt something release in his chest, not quite forgiveness, but the beginning of it. Chapter 8. The Ripple Effect. The reconciliation did not happen overnight, but it happened with genuine intention. Kwame Sr. slowly began to understand who his daughter-in-law was. He learned that she had taught herself to read 3 languages, that she had created an education program in the neighborhoods of Accra that now served 2,000 children, that she had raised money herself without asking her husband's family for a single seed eye. to build 2 small schoolhouses in the village where she was born. He learned about the strength of her character not through Kofi's descriptions, but by observing her directly, seeing the respect people showed her, the lives she had touched. His own pride, once shattered, began to be rebuilt on a different foundation. Kwame Sr. invested in Kofi's business, not as a gesture of dominance, but as a genuine partnership. He used his old connections to open doors in Europe and Asia, and Kofi walked through them with his own vision intact. The company grew, but it remained ethical, fair, rooted in principles rather than exploitation. More surprisingly, he began to speak publicly about his mistake. In an interview with a business magazine, he discussed how he had nearly destroyed his relationship with his son over prejudice, and how that son's refusal to compromise had ultimately changed his understanding of what mattered. The article went viral in Lagos. It sparked conversations about class, about love, about the price of tradition when tradition became a cage. Other families began to question their own assumptions. Not all of them, but some. Kwame Sr. died 2 years later peacefully, with Kofi and Ama by his side. His will left a substantial portion of his estate to an educational foundation established in Ama's name. The final lines of his will were the closest thing to an apology he could manage. "To my son and daughter-in-law, you taught me that dignity is not something you inherit. It is something you recognize in others and honor within yourself." Chapter 9. The Testimony. 7 years after that morning in the kitchen when Kofi had truly seen Ama for the first time, they stood together in the village where she had been born. They had returned for a ceremony. The 2 schoolhouses she had built now educated 300 children. They had painted the walls in bright colors and filled the classrooms with books donated by readers around the world who had heard her story. Children who had almost no chance at education now had teachers who understood, in their bones, what education meant, the difference between a life circumscribed and a life infinite. Ama stood in front of those children, some orphaned like she had nearly been, some from poverty so deep it seemed permanent, and she spoke not about success or wealth, but about choice. "I could have believed what people said about me," she told them, "that my station in life was fixed, that I would clean houses forever and that would be enough, that I was less than because I had less than, but then someone saw me, someone important saw me and refused to look away. And I realized that my worth does not come from what I own or where I was born. It comes from who I am. And who you are is not decided by where you start. It is decided by what you choose to believe about yourself." Kofi watched her from the back of the room, and he felt the gratitude that had become his constant companion. She had changed him far more than he had changed her. She had shown him what courage actually looked like. Not the courage of inherited privilege, making a grand gesture, but the courage of someone with nothing choosing to hope anyway. That evening, they sat on the roof of their small house, watching the stars emerge over the African sky. He held her hand the way he had learned to hold it, with tenderness and respect and the understanding that she had always been the brave one. "Do you regret it?" she asked, as she sometimes did. "Losing your family's money, the business, your position?" "No," he said simply. "I lost those things. But I gained a life that is actually mine. I gained you. I gained the ability to sleep at night, knowing I did not compromise my conscience for comfort. Those are better trades than I could have imagined." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in silence, the way they had learned to sit, not needing words to fill the space, comfortable in the presence of someone who truly knew them. The city of Lagos still gleamed on the horizon, with its towers and its power and its assumption that wealth was the highest form of wisdom. But here, in the darkness, in a small house with a woman who had once been invisible, Kofi had found something more valuable than all of it. He had found the truth that his family had forgotten, that a single act of seeing someone fully, of refusing to accept society's judgment of their worth, could change not just two lives, but the trajectory of generations. Epilogue. Years later, when people asked Amma how she had stayed strong through those impossible months, she would simply smile and say, "Someone loved me when I had nothing to offer but my honesty. That was strength enough." Subscribe for more stories of compassion, courage, and second chances. Thank you for watching African Billionaire's son fell for his dad's housekeeper. And remember, one act of kindness can rewrite a destiny.